And Namaste, Vijayaji, and namaste to everyone. Vijayaji, just a little background on Vijaya Bhagni. She has studied and worked in 2 decades in US, Europe, Singapore, in the industry ranging from manufacturing to finance to consulting. She's an Ivy League graduate with a master's degree in manufacturing engineering from University of Massachusetts. She also has an MBA in finance and entrepreneurship from Wharton Business School. She's actually currently president of Infinity Foundation India, which is headquartered in Chennai. She works as a volunteer there. She's actually a proud mother of 2 sons, and she's actually homeschooled both her sons. One of them is still, I think, is going to pass out of school this year, and her eldest son is in first year of in Stanford University doing computer science. So I will start the discussion with Vijayaji. My first thing is that why did you decide to homeschool your kids?
So namaste everyone. Happy to be here, and for a long time I've been sharing my experiences individually. So this is a great forum to sort of share what little I know. This is not the right. So before I even start, I want to say that homeschooling is not for everybody, and it's not for every family and not for every child. But I am not sort of the expert on it either. I can just share with you what little I have learned along my journey. And if it helps you guys, that would be great. Now, having said that, to answer Sangeeta's question of why I chose to homeschool was my kids very fancy public schools, private schools in the US at that time. And I sort of just did the group thing of, this is the best school, and, you need to get in here quick. And once they're there, that sort of their life is sort of launched from that point on. And the more I sort of inquired, so they both did get into very fancy schools. Actually, the older one got in, and then the younger one, as he got in, I pulled him out. But got in, and once I started realizing what that entailed, I really wasn't too happy with. Because it was this group think. Nobody wanted to say the emperor had no clothes. It was about networking. It was about these things, and hardly to do with learning. At that very same time, I myself, I met my guru as well. And I started realizing how little I knew about Indian sciences, spirituality, Indian shastras, so to speak. And I was quite alarmed at my own ignorance, because here I was, I had a very fancy job, and I was making a decent salary. I was, I had 2 masters. I was, a graduate of the world's best business school at that point, which is the Wharton Business School. And yet I had zero knowledge about where I came from, what my languages were, poetry in my languages, just linguistics. This is various things. I even to say that they really did not, when irrelevant or did not matter, I didn't have enough knowledge. For you to say physics is irrelevant, you need to know physics and then counter it. So I just had zero knowledge on the subject matter to say, hey, this is superstitious. Even to say that Indian sciences and all are superstitious, you need to have studied it to make that statement. I mean, we easily say that about anything in the Indian Shastra field, but we would dare not say that about physics or astronomy or anything, right? None of us would dare say that about any of these modern subjects, because, you would say that, well, you have to do some study and then sort of refute it logically. And so I felt like I had zero knowledge to even say this, was irrelevant or didn't make sense or was just superstitious. Some, people sat under a tree those days and came up with something. So I ended up, and then so that was one side. The other side was, where they were in these fancy private schools, like I said, and I was appalled by the quality of the teacher. Here I was paying, at that time, 15 years ago, I was paying like $30,000 for a school and for my son's education. And I found the teacher to be just, it was all about fun, and kindergarten was about socializing. And, she just, when I asked her about, okay, when do you start cursive writing? She said, not till, second grade. And even I myself don't know how to write in a cursive form. So the whole thing was just sort of, was very shallow. And I thought to myself, well, there's not one academic thing that she brought out. And then, so I just pulled them out on over a weekend, essentially, because my basic premise was that she has 18 kids and I have 2. I am far more sort of, don't want to sound arrogant, but I just seem to have a higher IQ than she had in just general matters. Hardly thought through anything in any of her answers. And the last thing was that, she had 18 kids of different abilities and I had 2 kids of different abilities. And she has a vested interest in making herself a teacher. And I had none of that, right? If something did not work, I'd be the first one to stand up and say, hey, I'm not a good teacher. Maybe we need to put them back in school. Mm-hmm. So because my goal was not to be the best kindergarten or first grade teacher. It was to make sure we parted education. So with that, I pulled them out of school over a weekend. So there wasn't anything dramatic. It was just that I thought through some things. And I thought, what am I doing? Because everybody puts people in school doesn't mean I should too. So.
Okay. Great. My next thing I want to ask you was, how did you go about choosing, how to homeschool, like how to teach, what to teach, and where to get information and all that? So what is the ways to teach homeschooling?
Yeah. So once you jump in, it's like there are many people who think about homeschooling and who don't know whether they should do it. They don't know if they are qualified. They don't know if their children will listen. So there are all these questions, that come up. And the only way to sort of do it is to actually do it, to jump. You really have. So I had no choice, because come Monday morning, they were not going to school. So, so we had to really figure it out, right? So then I started, of course, heavily researching. I was giving them some math and things like that, but I started looking, and so in the Western system, at least in America, homeschooling has been done for a few decades now, and essentially started by the Christian religious folks who wanted to make biblical education as part of their education. And in public school, you're not allowed to do that in America. So what they started doing was to homeschool. So when you started looking at homeschooling in America, and even today, so there are some broadly, 3-4 paths sort of that you can choose. One is a sort of a traditional homeschooling where you just do what they do in school at home. So if you were to take a CBSE curriculum and just sort of a traditional homeschool, you just buy the books and teach the same thing, but at home. The second would be like a classical method of the homeschooling. And I will come to that in a bit, because that's the method I follow. And the third would be something which is very popular these days, even in India. Most of the Indian homeschoolers are all sort of unschooled, and it is sort of very child-driven. It has no sort of structure, and you sort of follow the interests of what the child wants to study. So if the child is interested in butterflies is what you study. And you put no pressure on the child, and it's sort of a loosey-goosey approach to homeschooling. I have a lot of issues with that because I just think, you know, there is this discovery method of schooling where a second grade kid is asked to write a haiku poem, you know? And essentially it's garbage in, garbage out. Like, unless you've read 1,000 poems, how would you write a poem? So in the traditional method, which I follow, I'll come back to that later, we approach poetry very differently. So that's sort of the unschooling method. Then you have, of course, this Charlotte Mason method, which is used to be popular, but is not that popular anymore. And then you have sort of a Montessori sort of system that you can follow at home. So there are these various kinds of homeschooling methods, so to speak, and some of them are hybrid of everything because you control what you want to teach. So I followed the traditional method, and in the West, not traditional, the classical method of homeschooling, where it's sort of divided. It's called the trivium. There are three parts to this education. There is the grammar phase, the dialectics phase, and then the rhetoric phase of education. And in the grammar phase, when the children are really young, it's the elementary education. You commit a lot of things to memory. So again, going back to my poetry example, you were committing, instead of writing your own haiku poem, you're actually committing great poems to memory, because you're like a sponge. The idea is that little kids can't do much of analysis or logic at that stage, but can commit. Their minds are like sponges, and they can commit a lot to memory. And it's a very, very common even in traditional Indian education, where if you look at traditional Indian education, a lot of Veda, shlokas, all committed to memory at a very young age. And then later on, you look into what they all mean. So in the West, at least, this trivium, so you have the grammar phase where you commit a lot of things to memory, like times tables. You will commit poetry to memory. You will learn a lot of words and vocabulary and phonetics and things like that. And then you come to the dialectic stage, which is the logic, where you start learning logic, how 1 + 1 becomes 2, and how you multiply, and you learn the operations of it. And then you finally have the rhetoric stage, where you can then come up with analysis and argumentation and sort of critical thinking type things. By the time you come to that in high school stage, you have all these things committed to memory that you can use as references, you can use as examples. So you have known patterns of thinking by great minds, yeah. And then you come up with it. So by the time you've learned 1,000 poems, and you've learned prosody and metrics and meters and things like that in English poetry, then in the high school years, you're ready to compose your own poem. And oftentimes you'll find that after reading 1,000 great poems by great poets in history, you realize how badly you fall short. It's a humbling experience. Instead of telling the child, "Oh, you're so great, why don't you compose a haiku in second grade?" So that's sort of the approach that I took personally. You're on mute, Sangeeta. Can't hear you.
Okay. So now to the next question, like, you chose this style, but why did you choose this style?
So why I chose this is essentially I wanted to first I chose this style, and then I also adapted to the Indian sort of education. So I'll tell you, so the reason I chose this style is that I myself lacked a lot of these things. So if you ask me to recite a Tamil poem or a poem in Sanskrit, I would have read it somewhere, but I just would not have the ability to quote it because I would have just read it in the recent past. And to sort of enjoy, it's not so much to show off, but to enjoy that shloka or the verse or the poem in its in its true meaning, because in adult life is when these things you actually understand the meaning of the deep philosophical metaphysical meaning of certain things, and as you're doing it, the rasa is lost if you are not able to bring it to to the fore of your of your mind. So it's very important to learn these things by heart, in my opinion. And also in any subject, if you take to do wonderful maths, to actually do the beautiful, they talk about mathematics as almost art, right? If you talk to real mathematicians, like if you've watched Manjul Bhargav, the Fields medalist, he has this sort of beauty of mathematics and all of that. So for you to achieve that level of observation, right, to see the beauty and subtlety of in any subject, in literature or mathematics, you need to sort of go through some basic building blocks. So you need to learn your tables, and you need to be you need to have the ability to play with numbers and just see patterns and relish it in that way. And so it's very important to commit certain things to your mind. And so the traditional the classical system gives you that opportunity and doesn't waste your time. And precious time that and it's something that you can't reverse. What you can learn between the ages of, say, 3 and 6, 7, you cannot actually learn that in the ages of 7 to 14. And not, definitely not after the age of 30 or 40. So that's the reason why I chose it, and I'm happy that I did, because so the second part is that we took all these things and adapted it to Sanskrit and Sangeetam. So even our traditional, ours is Indian system is also sort of interesting because it's oral. It's an oral tradition more for the most part. So in the oral tradition, you're asked to keep everything to memory. So in fact, there's an interesting discussion with Swami Paramarthananda in Chennai, who's another great Advaita teacher, Sanskrit scholar, Advaita teacher. And so they were talking about how, how you can use a device to record the Upanishad, the lecture, something, or Gita, whatever, and then play it back this way or play it in bits. And then Swami, there's a whole discussion. And then Swamiji just laughed and he said, that's what we did in the old days. We just learned everything, committed everything to memory. I can't hear you, Sangeeta, you're muted. Did you say something, Sangeeta? You're muted.
My kids came to disturb me, so.
Okay.
Sorry.
No, that's okay. So anyway, so Swamiji was just saying that we just committed to memory, and then we would just sit under the tree and bring it all back and do the analysis. So similarly, in Sanskrit, you can do a lot of these things by learn by heart, and then in fact the tradition expects that. So if you're learning linguistics, or if you're learning Sanskrit grammar, you're supposed to know the Panini Sutras by heart, and then learn to apply them on the spot, because we don't have time to go refer and Google something and do all of that. So, and similarly in mathematics. So I started applying these things in Sanskrit, and also music. Our music tradition, anyone who's learned any amount of Carnatic music will know that, you just, the guru sings and you have to sing back. And the old days, they would just be expected to remember. And, in fact, there are some music gurus today that will not let you record the class. They'll tell you pay attention, because we always have this fallback option of going back to the recording. So we never pay attention while you're in class. So there are some teachers, I understand that, and I know that do this, will insist on not having classes recorded so that the student pays more attention. So you can adapt these methods to Indian Shastras as well.
Right. Actually, you know what I wanted to say, I'm getting messages on chat, really applauding you and saying that it's great that, Trivandrum style of memory and Sangeetam, it's awesome that, what you're doing. So I wanted to mention that right away, rather than moving on to the
No, I
next
think
question.
many people do it. It's not something that I've done uniquely. And so here, again, I want to say that there is something, so I have two boys right now. One is just joined as a freshman at Stanford, who's back home because of this COVID thing. But he's never actually, interestingly, and I need to add this as well. So he's actually never done any coding in high school. We've raised him, we are a TV free family. We've always been for decades, I think. And we've used electronics not for entertainment. So the policy in our house is to use electronics for education, but not for entertainment. And so he's never actually done any programming, but he's done a lot of advanced math. And he's in Stanford doing computer science, and he's taking some of the highest level courses in computer science. Yes, he's had a bit of trouble because all the kids come in knowing how to program in Java or Python and all of that. But he's, within a quarter, he's caught up with the mechanics of, Python and Java and all of that. But he's able to think logically and perform at the highest levels. In fact, his computer science classes are, for a freshman even, are very high level classes. So, so that's, again, that is not to say because he's such a brilliant chap. It's to say that, that there is a lot to be said for just rigor so the classical system also gives you a lot of rigor. If you, it's not this loosey-goosey, child-driven. I mean, I'm not one for, it just doesn't suit my personality, as you would have already guessed by now, that I cannot have a child dictating terms to me. And that's why I get the chance to be a parent. So, so I've been bossed around by my mother. I'm not going to let her boss me around now. So anyway, so that's why the unschooling thing doesn't work for me. But also one has to understand that this classical method of education is a very rigorous kind of education, and that rigor is essentially what makes the children perform. Most of our kids, would be average, above average in intelligence. So it's not so much about the intelligence; it's more about about the rigor that is used. The other thing is the lack of rubbish coming into the house, whether by means of TV or random friends, is a problem, and we can talk about that a little bit more. But so half the battle is that you'll find if you don't have random influences coming in, it's more than half the battle. Right. And then you can add stuff to enhance.
Okay. Now, like the next thing I'm thinking of is that, the knowledge of Shastra and everything is all good, but eventually, they have to go back into the real world. So how do you bridge the gap with the mainstream?
So yeah, I also, I worried about that a bit. So let me say that so I'll tell you the result of this. My older one is in Stanford, like I said, studying computer science. My younger one is a 12th grader, and he has a few options. I think this week some of those applications come in, and he's already got into Georgia Tech and Michigan and some of the very fine institutions to study aerospace engineering. So that's sort of the result. And So I'm all for relevance. I'm not sort of buried in the sand where I think uh, that I think that all this Western education, modern education is irrelevant and all of that. I actually do want to have my kids sort of uh, you know uh, get mainstreamed
Mhm.
and mainstreamed well, and not sort of have a consolation prize because they've
Mhm.
sat at home, and they should get to the places they want to go.
Mhm.
So having said that, I think so the way you bridge the gap is I've sort of combined Western education along with Indian education,
Mhm.
and I think I wish I had a place like Agastya actually, to help me with this, because I had to go find teachers and try and sort of charter this whole course myself, when not many people were homeschooling.
Mhm.
Um, so whereas now we have quite a few families that are indeed homeschooling, are thinking about it.
Mhm.
um, so I think if you stick to a particular curriculum, and in India there is this NIOS, which I'm not too happy about, and then there is CBSE and all of that, but then you have to be in a school to do those exams. So the
Mhm.
reason we chose to go with the American system is it gave us flexibility
Mhm.
to do certain standardized exams, because I
Mhm.
was interested in mainstreaming.
Right.
So you sort of work backwards, thinking which kind of and most of you, I'm assuming, have smaller kids, so you don't have to worry right now, and a lot of things will change by the time your child is 6 years old to the time they are 16.
Mhm.
So but then you can you can roughly have an idea as to what your overall plans are
Mhm.
based on the child, and you don't even have to go to Western universities. My kids so wanted to do engineering, that sort of thing, so I did this. But if there are children who want to pursue some performing arts and fine arts and things like that, there are alternate methods to do all of that. So so eh, so I am very keen on relevance,
Mhm.
because they need to get a job in today's world, and
Okay.
so it's good to then choose an overall, I mean, based on your child's um, interests, you can choose some area of higher education, either in India or certain field or something, and sort of work backwards from there,
Mhm.
roughly, because by the time they're 10, 11, they sort of tell you what they like, and you sort of know what they like.
Mhm.
And so you can sort of start preparing the ground for mainstreaming.
Okay.
So maybe start around 12, 13, roughly. You don't have to go crazy, but a rough idea as to, okay, my child is interested in performing arts, and this is where
Right.
she wants to go. Yeah.
Right. Okay. That's great. My next thing is question was that there must be a lot of challenges that you must have faced along the way. So, what was the various challenges
Uh,
during
so
homeschooling?
so this COVID-19 is sort of interesting to many people, because they don't have, they're not used to having children at home.
Yes.
uh, and for me it's I've always had my kids at home 24/7, 365. In fact, during the Chennai floods, 4 years back, the people in my flat, the women started calling me and coming home and asking me, so what the hell do you do? Because there was no power, so there was no TV, and the schools had shut down, and mothers were going crazy with the children at home. So I had like a few
Mhm.
calls, and some ladies who stopped by to say, so I mean, now we realize what you must be going through. And I said, what do you mean? Said, we don't know how to keep our kids entertained, because there's no television, there's no Nintendo, there's nothing, and neither is there school. So how long, what do you do?
Mhm.
So so I sort of, I mean, we were laughing at home. So the thing is, when you are homeschooling, you have to be extremely disciplined yourself. It actually, um, it teaches you to be a better adult, so homeschooling is so much more for you as the parent, just as parenting is it sort of makes you a better person in some ways, right? It makes you think of somebody else other than yourself. I mean, and you may have noticed that in people without children, because they're all about themselves and their time and their gym, and I mean, nothing wrong with that, but it sort of strikes you like, oh wow, so you kind of take that to the next level, right? So
Right.
it teaches you to be a proper adult yourself, how you behave, how you the kind of friends you have, the kind of food you eat, the time you get up, the kind of daily achara that you practice. So it forces you to be a good role model, and that's a good being. And and so because you're having children all the time, they're watching you,
Right.
through,
Right.
and the language that you use, the everything, your laziness, your everything, all your weaknesses are exposed,
Yes.
and
Yes.
and you want to be the best role model possibly
Uh-huh.
can.
Right.
And so the challenge is that you have to be consistent, and one of the things is that you do things that are sustainable. So if you start off teaching, high into first week, you're trying to make this all so fun, and yeah, every concept you're doing all of this, then you have to ask yourself, is this sustainable? Is this level of innovation and the sort of fun spirited, leaving everything, all the household chores, right? And focusing on it, is that sustainable? So you should do things that are sustainable, that fit into daily life.
Right. Right.
Otherwise it's not, you can do it for a week or 2 weeks, you can only pretend, and after that it doesn't last. So that is one thing. The other thing is setting very realistic expectations for the children as well. So that this is how the day goes, we all do. The idea of Swadharma comes, very beautifully when you homeschool, because unless each one does their duty, their role well,
Yes.
the house can't function.
Yes. Yes. I'm trying to do that right now. I like you said, all the kids are home, right? So I tell them that I'm not the only one in the house responsible for everything. So everyone has
Right.
to chip
So
in.
each one has to step up and do their part. Like, so
Yes.
everybody has to eat at the same time. Otherwise, I can't.
Yes.
So I don't. So I run it very structured, because
Right.
I don't want to be a victim either.
Right.
So
Yes.
2 days I can serve each one their own thing, but on the fourth day I fall apart. Right.
Right.
So it has
Yes.
to be, anything that you do has to be sustainable,
Absolutely.
so that no one is taken advantage of. Not even me.
Right.
So
Yes.
you have to make sure that whatever you do, yes, they are children and they don't feel like eating and they whatever, right? But then and one day you can make an exception, but if you kind of do this willy-nilly, then that whole system is not sustainable and it falls apart. And if you as a primary caretaker and the homeschool administrator falls apart, then the entire house falls apart. So you have to be extremely disciplined and not get carried away one way or the other. So that's one thing. So structure is very important, setting expectations, and I keep expectations extremely low. Like entertainment can be just watching an ant, or reading a book. I mean, that's like we would have a documentary movie projected on the wall as a great source of entertainment. That's sort of once a month or something, you look forward to this. It's where you have all these channels on TV, but then you don't have a TV. You can buy a tape, and then you put it on, project it on the wall, and you put the curtains and make it dark and sort of bring pillows, and so it's essentially an expectation setting.
Right.
And my kids would be extremely thrilled about these documentary movie nights. And we would watch, that Twinkie, how to deconstruct a Twinkie. And so that would also be sort of educational, but they would be happy because there's a movie,
Right. Right.
or some National Geographic kind of thing. So to set the expectations is very important. So being happy is all relative, and this whole idea of titillating all the time, right? I'm bored. It's just something. It just gets me because I just turn back and say, "Oh, I'm just an very uncreative person that you have constantly bored with yourself." I mean, because you have to ultimately teach children that nobody's going to constantly titillate you in life. That all sources of entertainment you have to provide, from within, and so those sorts of things, just very basic things, is the challenge.
Okay, that's right. Okay, yeah. So I think I'll open up to the audience. I have some questions already on the chat, so I will just go over them one by one. One of them, Jashri Ji has asked, which board of education did her boys give their grade 10 and 12 exams?
So we went through the American system, which is essentially 9th, 10th, 11th, 12th. It's a cumulative 4-year system. And it works very differently rather than just one exam of 10th and 12th, like the Indian system. So Indian system is like the UK system. And ours is more 9th, 10th, 11th, 12th. There are a bunch of... so the American system in a nutshell is a very a broad system. It's got breadth and not that much depth. So you have to study you can't choose, after 10th you can't choose commerce, science, you can't choose that way, but you are expected to study literature and world history and science and physics, and so that's the system we went with the US boards.
Okay.
But that's not necessary. I mean, you can do any other. That's what I knew the best, and was the easiest for me given our background. So also anything that I tell you, you have to see whether it suits your family, your personality, and all of that.
Someone had this question. Can she comment on the Waldorf schools and compare that with Diksha curriculum and philosophy?
I'm not a big fan of the Waldorf education, although I did check out anthroposophy and all of that. A lot of, in fact, if you look at Rudolf Steiner himself, he took a lot of things from in this whole anthroposophical movement. Was a lot of things that were appropriated from Vedic thought. And desacralized to some extent and brought into the Steiner schools. Now, having said that, when you go into a Steiner school, it's very impressive. You have beeswax crayons, and you have organic food and vegetarian and all this body movement, whatever they have some name for it. So they do all of that. They teach you how to build a house, cook your food. So all great. But, so here is the but. It's too loosey-goosey for my style A. And I'll give you an example of, see, I believe in excellence, Ultimately, if you, whatever field, you are in, even in agriculture, you should pursue excellence. And so, for example, the Waldorf school has the same teacher from grade 1 to grade 10. And the same teacher teaches you English and physics and chemistry and, and let's not kid ourselves, to teach physics. I myself, I've done all kinds of fancy things in math and physics. I'm a master's in manufacturing engineering. I've done all sorts of modeling and things like that. But to teach physics at the 10th, 12th level, you should have taught 20 years of physics, because so the Waldorf school has the same teacher teaching all these, so they know the kid very well. But then it's the same teacher who teaches everything. And I'm not so sure by 10th grade, one has the experience to teach all these at the level of exposition that it needs.
Mm-hmm.
Number two, the children, with the same teacher, they do not use textbooks. They don't believe in textbooks. And I'm okay with going all oral tradition, but you follow one system fully. Now, when you don't have your own textbooks and you believe in your own notes, I am not so sure how well you can do physics in 10th, 12th grade. I don't know if you can hold a candle to a kid that's doing JEE. So that's where I have a problem with the Waldorf school. It's too loosey-goosey for my style. Plus, it's got a lot of things that are appropriated from Vedic ideas are appropriated. When I can give the original, I do not want a fake Western Vedic, desacralized Vedic form of idea that's being taught.
Hello, I have a question. You mentioned about rote learning and putting things to memory. So I'm curious, did you get your kids to learn the Vedas? If so, who was their guru? How did you get them to a Gurukula?
So they did learn. So this Vedic thing is interesting. So in India, if you look, there are Patashalas and then there are Gurukulams. Now, unfortunately, the Patashala is where the Vedas are taught. Now, if you, most of the Patashalas, in my opinion, they teach only Vedas, and they are not run very well for various reasons. Some could be funding, some could be poor leadership and administration and cheat teaching. Some could be poor students, because students who have no other sort of option. The really, like, the dullards of society end up coming to the Patashalas, not the kids who are bright, who want to, So there's all kinds of problems with the Patashala system. The Gurukulams, on the other hand, they teach, for example, Veda Vijnana Gurukulam in outside Karnataka. They do both. They teach Vedas and some of the Shastras. They teach Mimamsa, Vyakarana, within Sanskritam, right? And then you and Tarka, and then they do the Prasthanatrayam, and so they have some sort of and those are taught well by very good teachers, and they produce excellent graduates. Now, my boys did go for basic Veda classes on the side, but that wasn't, and what you'll also notice is, by the time they're 6th or 7th grade, you will have to start choosing, because you cannot do all of this and all of that. All of the because the modern education stream ends up being intense. So does the traditional stream. So at some point, I mean, you can do this straddling between both for a while, but after 7th, 8th, if you're looking for excellence and mastery of a certain subject, whether it is in the traditional subjects or whether it is in the modern subjects, you will very soon find out that you will have to commit to one thing to do it well. So our house, the pradhanyam for ours was mainly the modern subjects, which we along with. So my boys didn't do any foreign language. For the US system requires 4 years of foreign language, and they did Sanskrit for that. So those sorts of things, and homeschooling, of course, gave us a little bit more time to do few of the other things, like delve deep into Vyakaranam and music, do a bit of Ganita, things like that. So the Veda chanting became sort of more of a very, so we looked at it more as a Brahma Yagyam, where we learnt Vedas for half an hour a day, for 5 days a week. something of that sort, just to sort of keep it going. It wasn't something that was which occupied full-time resources.
Actually, I just noticed that Vamsi Jaluri is also on this call with us, and he's also actively into homeschooling moment. I don't know if he has a moment, and can we hear something from him? Something he wants to add, Vamsi ji. Okay, I saw him. He was there a little while ago. I don't see him now. So let's just continue with the questions. And if he joins us, then we'll ask him again. Okay, let's just, does anyone else has any questions while I'm still reading anything in the chat? Does anyone else have any questions?
Namaskar, this is Prashant. I'm based in Switzerland in Geneva. We're also, of course, under lockdown. Just wanted to, a couple of questions which I did have, I typed them out in chat, but maybe it's easy to speak about it. With the first question, how was the social aspect managed? You know, in the sense, you know, how other kids meeting other kids, you know, learning from other kids, playing with other kids, interacting with other kids, because that's, I mean, especially, I mean, for all its flaws in terms of traditional schooling, I do remember having A, made wonderful friends, and B, also that being a very enriching part of my own growing up. So how was that aspect? How do you deal with that aspect with your children?
Okay, yeah, this is a question actually I get asked the most, and it's actually the least of has been, at least in my experience, the least of my problems, and I'll tell you why. So socializing ends up being good and bad socializing, and so when people say, "How do you?" they usually ask me, "So how do you just sit with each other like 8 hours a day?" And I throw the question back at the person who asks me by saying, what makes you guys think that an 8-year-old should be with other 8-year-olds for 8 hours a day, and that's like the ideal socializing? So that's one part, and I've never got a good answer for this. Yeah. Now, having said that, socializing has never been a problem because I also agree with you that kids need to be with other kids and all of that. Now, mine have, we live in a huge flat community. So it is you know, socializing in the evening through games and activities and things like that. Now, the second thing is that they volunteer. So my older one was a teacher at Samskrita Bharati, would be teaching, you know, shibirams for people aged between 4 and 72 or 81 or whatever, depending on who shows up for class. So these sorts of social activity is very enriching because you can manage the kind of sangha. I'm also a great believer in who you hang out with, you know, especially when you're homeschooling. So even my own sangha had to change because there are people that I would not bring into the house, because again, these are not to judge them for any reason, but because I am now trying to give role models to my kids. So you know, there are a lot of people that I bring in that because of pure sangha reasons. You know, they're just good people to emulate. They are big people in social service, or people that do pravachanam, or people that are contributors essentially in some way. And so one way to do it is to play, and you know, in this big apartment complex. The other thing is, you know, when you go to Veda class, you see, so when you're homeschooling, you see, get different sanghas based on the activity that you do. So in Veda class, you see a few people. In Samskrita Bharati, when you're teaching, you just see a totally different group of people. During the floods, you volunteer and you help out, and there you meet another totally different group of people. So these are ways you sort of engineer your socializing. So I've never really found that to be a problem.
Hurry, Bitu. Hurry. Hurry.
And the other thing, when people ask me, they say, so there's another question that comes up when I talk about socializing, and I say, hey, I engineer this, and they say, isn't that sort of in the true world, you have to be with, learn to live with everybody and work with everybody in the real world? And I absolutely agree with that. I just differ in thinking when that should be done. And if that is the case, then all of us would be living in the slum and putting our kids into the corporation school or the worst school that's in your neighborhood. Why don't we do that? Because you want good sahapatis for your children, you want a good environment for your kids. So there is a kind of filtering that we do by choosing. If you're in Chennai, you'd go to Padma Sheshadri or Vidya Mandir. So the very fact that you do that and don't put your kid in the corporation school close by shows that you do value some level of filtration. So I just take this filtration to another level because I think it's more important.
Okay. Someone wanted to find out the cost about the exams.
What exam?
Yeah, the exam that they have to write, the US exam, is there a cost to it? Or
yeah, so I think these are all college board exams, and it's just not one exam. It's subject by subject. In fact, and MIT right now, in fact, said there are no SAT subject tests anymore that they're taking. So I think it depends on the system, and then per exam you get charged, and then there are courses to to study to help you prepare for those exams. So it's a little more complicated than just telling you what exam and how much it costs.
Okay. Someone asked, who taught the boys half an hour of Veda classes?
A local priest. So since they were not doing this in any so the reason why we went to even do chanting and all that, I see most of the time when you look at temples, right, especially in the US, I don't know if in India they have, or pujas in India, when you have a family function and you find all the kids running helter-skelter, not knowing what's going on. Mm-hmm. And it's very important to teach the kids that and then most of the parents are saying, just behave yourself and just sit down, and the kids are bored out of their mind. Mm-hmm. So I like to see kids actually be more participatory in these sorts of events. And so when you learn suktams and you learn about a puja vidhi and what goes on in a ritual, mm-hmm. the children are able to participate and if they chant along, the person who's officiating would say, hey, great job, I didn't know you, and that motivates them. And so you have to give the children the tools to participate in these. Mm-hmm. So, and I think that's the failing of us, not the kids. We just ask them to behave or sit quietly and do all of that, and that's really not fair. Mm-hmm. Because they tend to be rajasic, and you need to give them an activity, to participate in. So as far as to answer your question directly, I think that Shastrigal's name was Pattabhirama Shastrigal or something like that. I can check and let you know. This was a while, and then they changed. So so somebody close by that it would also give them an opportunity to get out of the house. Mm-hmm. So so at 3:00 they would go for Vedam class.
Mm-hmm. I think another question somebody asked was, as a homeschooling mother, how did you educate yourself on skills of teaching how and when did you design the curriculum? I think you partly, I don't know if Anuji, you missed out on the portion. We did ask Vijayaji, how did she go about choosing a homeschooling style?
See,
If
you
you
should
want to add something to that, then please go ahead. Yeah.
So just to add to that, Sangeeta, the thing is, you should like to do this. So if that's why I said this is not for everybody and not for all, and that doesn't make you any less or doesn't make me a super mom or anything. I just love figuring out how things, how does this whole thing work, and how so I look to different curriculums and different, for example, I found, Singapore does, Russia and Singapore do very well in mathematics. I went to a local co-op in where I live in the US, and did English and things like that, because that's a subject I was not really interested in teaching. And then I became a student of Sanskrit myself, along with my older one, and we both enjoyed studying Sanskrit together as sahapatis. We were classmates. So it's about your interest in it, and if you genuinely want to sort of learn about it and do it, then lots of things, you'll sort of automatically be attracted to people who are also looking, because you seek the same thing, and it sort of it falls together. The thing is to take the jump and not be afraid, because you really have, especially if you have young kids, you have nothing to lose. So you should go ahead and try it out for 6 months, 1 year, and if it doesn't work, it's okay. It's just, this is not for you. That need not be for everybody, and you should not take it as a personal failure or anything. It's just a personality thing.
Hi Vijay, this is Anu, and thank you for answering that. That question was from me, and ever since my daughter has been born, I've been looking at homeschooling, and I've seen the Classical Conversations group and Charlotte Mason and all of them. And so my thing is, Charlotte, if you're talking about the co-op, I'm figuring that was your local Classical Conversations co-op, or was it not? Because they're very Christian education focused, and I want to integrate the whole Indian philosophy, Indian traditional education into the classical model, which I also like very much, the trivium. And so that was my question, like, how do you educate yourself on things you don't know? Like even what Gurukulam is doing here, Agastya is doing here, is there a parallel track for parents to also educate themselves while they are working on their kids learning all of this? Because the whole part of this is things I'm not aware of, and I've never been educated on either.
Where do you live, Anu? I'm just curious.
I'm in the DC area in Virginia, right outside of DC.
Okay, so there are these Christian. So my thing is, my kids were also part of a Christian co-op, and I think if you want to understand the Western world, Western literature, Western drishti, if you will, you need to understand the Judeo-Christian influence in art, in literature, in Western thought. So even to sort of be critical of it if you want. So my kids were, of course, part of a Christian co-op, and we learned a lot from that group. Very, very good group. The thing is, for example, you can transpose some of those ideas from. So just as they do for example, when you in classical education and literature, when they start learning prosody in English in meters, and I give this sort of example quite often, the iambic and all these sort of meters in English prosody, right? And then you teach them Sanskrit prosody in Sanskrit, and the Chanda Shastra. And before long, the children themselves realize that the structure of English prosody is like really loosey-goosey, and how well thought out the phonetic, the Shiksha Shastra, the Chanda Shastra, everything is so well structured. And why is Sanskrit really called Samyak Kritam? Why is it well done? Because you don't have to go on saying some Sanskrit means well done and all of that. They actually see with their own logical minds. By the time they're 6th, 7th grade, they are able to see it themselves, instead of you having to sort of brainwash them constantly on it and make it an emotional, we do it more as a, as an inquiry based conclusion versus an emotionally charged conclusion that this is indeed structurally superior. So I think there's a lot of value to doing the trivium in the Western system. Agastya is also based, so to answer the second part of your question, one of the reasons we have also, Agastya is a very rigorous curriculum. There's a lot of things that kids will commit to memory, like Amarakosha, which is the entire thesaurus. So, the dictionary of Sanskrit is in Chandas, is in proper meter, and is expected to be you're supposed to commit it to memory. So that if you're looking for paryaya pada, if you're looking for similar synonyms, you have it in your head. So, and that's very important to have it in your head, because if you're looking at chandas and you're composing, you will know how the meter flows. So then we do Vyakarana Panini Sutras committing to memory. So before we start Vyakaranam, all the sutras will, at least that's the plan, to make kids commit a lot of things to memory. Just like the trivium concept. So we do a lot of that. Then we start teaching them the grammar, and then they can perhaps write shlokas and poetry and things like that at the more advanced level. I don't know if I answered your question.
I think we are running over time, but I will just quickly ask if anyone has any other quick question. I did see there are some questions very specific to Diksha. One of the question was what medium of instruction would be. It would be mainly English for for teaching itihasas and all, but Pratna is Sanskrit, so we're teaching Sanskrit. So medium would be English, but we are even focusing on spoken Sanskrit that will be taught. So it will be a mix of both, where we see the English appropriation. It will be in English medium. So I hope that answered that. There are a few other questions about the program, what we're going to cover in each classes. That's why we have these preview classes this week, where we are giving details on what's going to get covered. So please do join us. It's every day. In India, 9 a.m. International batch. It starts at 9 a.m. Mountain Time, which is 11 Eastern and 8 Pacific.
Sorry to interrupt, but I'm a bit unclear. Are these preview classes only for the parents, or the children join in for?
Oh, so this is the preview classes going forward are for kids and children. Both of them can attend. Kids and parents, they both can attend, and yeah, it's for both.
And these classes will last for this week only for about an hour or so.
To the subjects that we are teaching in this 8 weeks. What would be taught, and a little preview on how the classes would be conducted.
And the other thing I wanted to tell you guys is that the people of Agastya, we've sort of started this because we are passionate about this. This is not a money-making venture by any means. In fact, whatever we give it to the teachers, we have to pay. So this is so that we don't lose a generation. We want to turn back the cultural clock. That's our sort of goal. I think I feel better than I did. even though they are the next generation, or maybe I would say even 2 generations. So I've kind of wound back the cultural clock 2 generations. And that doesn't say much about, it's not to say that they know a lot, it just means to kind of reveal how depleted we were as a family. So the attempt is a humble attempt to try and teach these kids about a rich heritage that they have come from, and to be custodians of it in the future, and to pass it on, and to nourish it in some way, to support it, nourish it, be custodians themselves by being scholars of it. So that's the attempt. The attempt is not to have a business venture on this. In fact, we all volunteer time and money and all of that to make all of this happen. So I just wanted that to be, very clearly understood. So this has nothing to do with, in fact, we would do Vidyadanam if we could actually do it. But we have teachers who look for compensation because they have no other means, and they're supporting families. So that's essentially where it is.
Yes, that's right. Somebody asked me the age. Yes, please go ahead.
One last question. Are these webinars over yesterday and today, the recordings available? Because my wife, for example, couldn't join in right now. So would it be possible for her to see it somewhere?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, we recorded this session. We will upload it on our YouTube channel, and we'll send it out a link to everyone on the Agastya Gurukulam. Yeah.
Fantastic. Thank you.
Hello, this is Shrikant Menon from Richmond, USA. Thank you so much, Vijayaji. I just wanted to talk about that point you mentioned, becoming a student of Sanskrit. Does Agastya Gurukulam have any tie-up with Language Curry, which Sampadanandaji is doing? I was a part of that yesterday, and just wanted to know if that ties up somewhere. It's a good platform for learning Sanskrit.
Sangeeta can answer that.
Yes. No, we don't have any ties with them, but we are using his books for teaching Sanskrit, his Dev Bhasha books and all. But we are looking. We're looking forward to working with them in any ways. I think we've looked at the application, but I think it's right now we just realized that it's only very basic. What we are looking for is more intense. So, and they are still working on developing it. So, at some point, we might be able to, incorporate it in our curriculum as well, but not in this.
Yeah. So we're also focusing on Sambhashanam in a big way, because Sambhashanam helps, which is Samskrita Bharati's sort of core thing, and that gives the students a sort of it does a couple of things. It removes mental block of the language being difficult, and it also so Samskrita Bharati's idea is more, we don't necessarily teach you Sanskrit, but we remove the blocks so that Sanskrit within you comes out. So so that is why Sambhashanam is a big part of our curriculum, but also Lekhanam is Lekhanam, those sorts of things also we focus on. So, and then all these Kantastikaranam of various shastras, like at least Amrakosha and Ashtadhyayi and a few shlokas, we will start.
Thank you so much. And is there any way we can help in spreading the word?
Talk to you.
You can help by spreading the word. If you have great teachers, please send them our way, because we want, there's an urgent need to expose our kids to this lost tradition. It's a fantastic tradition, and we should make sure that more and more of our kids are exposed to it, go deep dive into some of these specific shastras to whatever extent we can, as we try and straddle two systems, and maybe their kids, will be at a point where they can sort of do this full time. We also want to emphasize that these things have relevance. In fact, we are working, at higher levels. We're working with some of the college students, for example, to learn some of these things. For example, there's a Fitbit using the Ayurveda Nadi system, and we want to be so Apple has made billions out of that, and not out of this system but out of the Fitbit. And imagine if it can sort of test Panchanadis and come up with a Fitbit to give you the status of your health. So there are actual modern relevant applications of these shastras, and we want, if for example, Shiksha Shastra and speech therapy. So these kids can actually be innovators, learning these things. So it's just not something that we do because it's nice to do, it's must do for some emotional reason. It's actually, these can be big innovative, there could be a whole range of innovative companies that spawn out of these things, by being able to combine, these sort of seemingly unconnected dots.
Just to add to that point, I don't know how many of you have heard of Headspace. It's all everything from our Shastra, how to meditate, techniques are taken from there, and but and different things like Ayurveda and medicinal ways of treatment. So yeah, we're looking at.
So these are relevant subjects with probably great careers that can be spawned out of these things. So that's how we look at it. Not something that's just irrelevant. So
yes.
Any other questions?
There was one question about the Diksha program. The age is ages 6 to 9, but if you think your kid is older or younger and you think you want to attend, we are anyway giving free 2 weeks trial. You can assess if the pace is too fast or too slow for them and make a call within those 2 weeks if that program will work for you or not.
Okay, thank you for that. And thank you, Vijaya, for clarifying those questions about the classical conversations groups. And can parents attend with the kid? Because my daughter's only 6, and just to keep her even grounded in her sleep.
Yes.
We encourage that. We
we encourage that. Yeah, if the parent can sit along with the child. Yeah.
Thank you very much for this. This was very helpful.
Okay. I think.
Ram, I have a question. So this program is from March 30th to May 30th, right? Because there's uncertainty that when the schools are going to reopen. If schools reopen, practically it's not possible the kids could sit in the morning and attend this program. So
right.
Guys, what was the thought process behind having this program till May 30th?
It's better to have something. We just thought, all the kids are at home, and nobody knows when the schools will open. There's this uncertainty, right? It can open tomorrow, and it might not open in 6 weeks or 8 weeks. And we wanted to give something substantial, right? So we thought 8 weeks is a time where we can actually do something, and the kids will learn, and there will be some outcome of what we can provide. So that's why we came up with this 8-week program, because at the end of the 8 week, they will be able to achieve some goals, some things, and we have learned some things. So that's how the 8 weeks came into picture. We don't know that it will be over in 8 weeks. It just, we thought there's something the kids.
Some basic foundational aspects of Sanskritam can be imparted in 8 weeks. That's the, that was the reason behind, the 8 weeks. And we have to, I guess, as things progress, because nobody really knows, so maybe we can then make it weekend classes or something like that. I don't know. We have to figure that out ourselves.
Yeah, we'll figure that out if the school opens. Yeah.
Okay, cool. Thank you. The other question I had is, I know that this is a program which is kind of Monday to Friday thing, but if my kid has some of the concepts listed in the syllabus already or part of a different program, can she attend just a couple of days? Is that all, or is there a continuity between, for example, Sanskrit 2 days and Max 2 days? Can you attend just Max or just Sanskrit? Is there an option?
You know, the pace would be different. So, and you know, things will be covered in Sanskrit, which she might not have seen in the other program. So it would make sense for her to attend everything rather than missing out, and then realizing, oh, I don't know this thing, but you know, this thing was already taught. So then we don't want anyone to miss out on any of the things. In the beginning, if you find that something that she already knows, you can skip the classes, but eventually, you know, the content would be a little different too.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, I think that's all we had, and thank you so much, everyone, for joining us.
Thank you, everyone.
Yes.
If you have any questions, you know, please forward it, and I'd be happy to email you or whatever. So it was nice chatting with everybody. Thank you.
Thank you. Dhanyawad. Thank you.